This story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it is the single most mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It's also important to note that it happened in mid-November. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like if you get stuck outside, you will die kind of cold. That plus the snowfall makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house, and even immediately outside of it. Well, me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with co-workers. So me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I hear the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately go shit and start looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and heard my mother yell out, "Sebastian, anyone home?" I yell back up the stairs, "Yup, just hanging out in the basement." I hear a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs. And she yells out again, "Can you come to help me with something? I need you up here." I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle. "Yup, give me just a minute." Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" She yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off from my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right, and the voice was just wrong, like it sounded like my mother's. But it was missing something that I couldn't snap my finger on. Weirded out, I replied back, "Just Colton." After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house and the slight electric twinge that something wasn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I looked over to where the door to the garage was and also the kitchen right next to it. And it was black, pitch black. All of the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen, yelling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline kicks in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton says. "My mom's not home," I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. "What do you mean?" "You were just talking with her." I could see the confusion on his face. "There's no one home. We need to leave now." I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I saw my dog shaking on the couch and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen. Colton said, still confused as all hell, "No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out." I pull out my phone, call my mom. She picks up immediately. "Sebastian, what's going on?" She answers, "Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up you weren't there." I said frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. "No, I'm just leaving the bar. I wasn't feeling very well." "What do you mean you had me?" I fill her in on the whole story, and she rushes home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home. But before she did, you could hear something upstairs, not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air, like a black hole, was slowly moving from one room to the next, and the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel the thing leave just as quick as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us. But this is the easiest to write down, and one that I was happy to have a witness. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved away to Arizona. But whenever I go back to Iowa and I see Colton, he still gets creeped out by what had happened. I will never truly know what happened, but I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was evil, and it was hungry. A day before Valentine's Day, 2010, I experienced the most terrifying night alone at home that I hope I ever experience. But it has more to do with the tragic as opposed to the paranormal. My mom and dad had asked me to dog sit our family German Shepherd at the house I grew up in Philadelphia, while they took their first, them only vacation since my brother or I had been born. The plan was for them to be gone 8 days, but the night in question, the third night after they'd left, was reason enough for them to come home early. I was sleeping on the couch in the living room, as my old bedroom was now a storage room for my dad's stuff. And around 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, an explosively loud bang woke me up from a dead sleep, and my dog started going crazy. I assumed it was his barking that had woken me up, so despite being scared shitless, my first thought was to sit up on the couch and call him over to me to reassure him that everything was fine, and he could go back to sleep. But just before I was going to sit up to do that, I heard a woman scream, "No, Dad, no," in absolute terror, followed by another incredibly loud bang, and immediately felt tiny wood splinters fall into my eye from the wall the couch was against as they trickled down onto my face. That second bang turned out to be the sound of my neighbor shooting and killing his daughter. Those wood shavings that had gotten into my eye, they were from where the impact of either her body or the bullet, or both, hitting the wall directly on the other side of where I was sleeping had splintered some of the brick between our houses and caused my living room wall to push in a few millimeters. My head would have been pretty damn close to this spot had I actually sat up after the first bang to reassure my dog. Given that the bullet didn't actually come through the wall, I would have been fine even if I had sat up. But knowing what I know now, I'm glad I laid there for that extra second. Naturally, I called 911, made sure my front and back doors and all the windows were locked, because the last thing I needed was for the guy to try to get into my house. And within 3 minutes, the next bangs I was hearing were those of the police kicking the guy's door down and screaming for him to get on the ground. I sat at my window and watched them walk him out in cuffs and put him in a cruiser, and it wasn't until the cops in the one cruiser had driven away with him in the back that I finally opened my door to talk to the other cops that were still on the scene, and talk to some of them about what I'd heard, get a statement, and all that. A week later, I was subpoenaed to testify against him in court because he was claiming that the whole thing was an accident. However, I heard his daughter scream, "No, Dad, no," before he fired the second time. No way in hell it was accidental. Testifying against him was terrifying, because if he got off, well, he was my parents' neighbor, and I knew he wasn't above murder. Thankfully, the DA made sure he didn't get off. He's 70 years old now, and has another 20 plus years of jail time, with no possibility of parole. I was home alone when I was about 13. Mummy was at work and my sister was at school, while I skipped as I always tended to. It was about 1 p.m. when I picked up the phone to call my mum, and this was back when landline phones were more common, so it was one of those pick it up then dial ones. But as you know, if you picked up a landline phone mid-conversation, you'd join the phone conversation, or you could at least listen in if you had multiple phones in the house. We only had one phone in the house, and it was this one. The only TV on in the house that was on was in mine and my sister's room, and it wasn't loud enough at all to be heard downstairs where the phone was, so this definitely fucked with me. I picked up the phone, and instead of a dial tone, I heard static, but not like loud static, just the white noise you'd hear over the phone when it's quiet on the other line, you know. Then I heard the voice of a young English girl, which is also weird because I live in Scotland and didn't know anyone from England, and she said, "Can you put that down, please?" To which I got a little spooked and answered, "What?" "Hello?" And she didn't seem to hear me, or if she did, she didn't want to answer. She just kept saying, "Please stop that. Don't do that. Put that down. Please stop. Please put that down. Don't touch that." In a sort of calm voice, almost melancholic at first, but getting more and more upset. I asked again, "Hello? Who are you?" And then heard the sound of fabric rustling near the phone like someone was shifting, and a grunt like a person would when getting up, and then I got freaked out by all this and just hung up the phone, ran upstairs, and didn't tell anyone until later that night when I told my mum, who lifted the phone herself and got a dial tone. She didn't believe me. She was just skeptical, but obviously disturbed by how upset I was over it. I think about it every so often and feel a little sick. I didn't know what to do at the time. I just freaked out and bailed, but I can't help but feel I got to listen in on something sort of horrible. The little girl sounded upset, and it sounded like there was someone with her. I don't know what I could have done, but I sure as shit didn't do it. This was 11 years ago now, and I've since moved out of that house and live in my own apartment.